voiceover with like a spooky voice. Like spook. No, that's not gonna work.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, it's great to meet you. I'm Stella, and I love making miniatures for my Barbie's dollhouse using mostly cardstock. In today's video, I'll show you how I made this teeny tiny miniature dollhouse, and since it's officially Halloween season, it's gonna be a haunted dollhouse. As always, I'll have free printables and templates to help you make your own version, and you'll find all the infos and the download link in the video. So now, let's begin. We're gonna start by making the front wall of our little dollhouse by cutting this part 2 or 3 times, and then we'll glue all the layers together. And as usual, I suggest using cardstock from old packaging for this, since it's quite thick but very easy to cut and virtually free, which never hurts, does it? Next, we're gonna cut this part and attach it to the piece we've just assembled like this. Then we'll have to cut this part, and this time I recommend using a lightweight type of cardstock, and we'll glue it to the opposite side of the wall. The final piece should measure 2 mm in thickness. Next, we're gonna cut this part a few times, and then we'll assemble all the layers in 2 groups, this way. Then we'll have to cover one side of each wall with this part, which we'll have to cut twice. And I suggest attaching the top and bottom parts first, then adding the middle piece, making sure it's perfectly centered between the upper and lower sections. You can also use the front wall as a reference to make sure everything lines up nicely. When that's done, we can turn the panels around and cover them with this part, also cut twice. The resulting panels should be 2 mm thick, and they'll be our little dollhouse's side walls. Next up is this part, and once again we'll have to cut and stack together 2 or 3 layers, and then cover the resulting little wall with this part on one side, and this one on the opposite side. Now we'll have to cut this part 3 or 4 times, glue all the layers together, and finally we'll cover the resulting piece with this part. We're gonna have to make a second identical panel, then we'll repeat the same process to make this final wall. We should end up with all these pieces, which should all be 2 mm in thickness. At this point, we can start painting the walls of our little dollhouse. We're gonna begin with a generous layer of acrylic gesso, and I personally like to apply it with a makeup sponge to get this sort of grainy texture that I think kinda resembles plaster. Then we'll color the front sides of each wall with acrylic paints, and I chose a dark purple shade to keep with the Halloween theme, but if you don't care for it, you can switch to a different color for a more traditional looking dollhouse. Once all the walls are painted, I highly recommend placing them in between 2 layers of kitchen paper and then under something heavy like a big book for a few hours. This will straighten them, and the kitchen paper will absorb any humidity left in the paint, preventing the walls from bending over time. To make a little door, we're gonna have to cut this part and glue it to this one. And if you're using my free pencil template, I suggest using a penknife to cut the tinier parts, and manicure scissors, preferably with curved blades, for the rounded parts. However, if you have a Cricut or a Silhouette cutting machine, you can use my digital templates, which you can find in my shop linked in the description, and this will make the process a little easier. We'll have to repeat this step to make 3 more doors. Then we'll have to cut this little arch 4 times and glue layers in 2 groups, this way. We should end up with these 6 pieces, which we'll have to paint black. When all the little doors and arches are ready, we can attach them to the inner and outer sides of the front walls, this way. To make the windows, we're gonna start by cutting this part, then we'll paint the outer frame black, and finally we'll attach the 2 sides together. We'll have to repeat this process to make 3 more windows, which we'll then glue to the outer side of the front wall, this way. Next, we'll have to cut this frame 4 times. Paint all the pieces black, and this time I tried using a marker to see if it could work, and it did, so that's another good option if you don't have any black acrylic paint available. We're gonna have to glue these frames to the inner side of the wall like this. Now, at this point, I had a bit of a change of heart, and I decided to paint the left and right edges of the 2 front walls with black paint, to give them just a little extra depth, if that makes sense. Next, we're gonna have to cut this part, paint all the pieces black, And finally, we'll glue them to the outer side of the main front wall. After that, we'll have to cut this part and assemble all the layers like this. And to be honest, I felt like this wasn't three-dimensional enough, so I added 2 teeny tiny strips of cardstock to the top this way. We'll have to paint the resulting piece black. Then we're gonna have to print and cut this little clock and glue it to the cardstock base. Lastly, we'll attach the tiny clock to the second front wall like this. At this point, and this is completely optional by the way, but I decided to coat the windows, the doors and the clock with just a touch of gloss varnish. Oh, and as always, I wrote down a quick list of all the supplies I used for this project in the description, just in case you need to check anything. Now that all the walls are ready, we can assemble them in this order. We can now begin working on the floors of our little dollhouse. We're gonna start by cutting this part a few times, and then we'll glue all the layers in 2 groups, each roughly 2 millimeters thick. We'll need to paint this edge on both panels, and this side of just one of the panels. All the other sides won't be visible, so we can avoid painting them. Next, we're gonna print and cut this part, and then we'll glue 2 layers on top of the panels we've just assembled. At this point, we can simply slide the floors into the grooves on the dollhouse's walls, and you can glue them in place if you want. Also, I'm not sure if you can tell from the video, but this little piece right here is supposed to go under the front walls. To make a little porch, we're gonna start by cutting this part 3 or 4 times, and yet again we'll have to stack all the layers together. We'll have to repeat the same step for this part and for this one, which we'll have to make twice. All pieces should be 2 millimeters in thickness, and we'll have to paint them black. When the paint is dry, we can assemble the 4 elements in this order. Next, we'll have to print and cut this part, and then we'll attach it to the top of the porch this way. Then we'll have to cut this part, paint all the pieces black, and I gotta say, not only using a marker works, but with this type of thing, it actually works better than acrylic paint, so I definitely recommend using a marker if you can. We're gonna attach the 3 pieces together like this. And then we're gonna have to fold the sides at a 90-degree angle. Finally, we can glue the little fence to the porch. At this point, we can attach the porch to the front of the house. And then we can cut this part, paint it black, and finally we'll glue 2 pieces to the sides of the house and to the porch, holding these strips over its front side. To make the porch roof, we'll have to cut this part 3 or 4 times and stack the layers together to get to a final piece that's around 2 millimeters thick. We're gonna cover it with this part, and then we can paint the entire piece black. We'll have to attach the roof right above the porch, and then we'll cut this part and paint it black. We're gonna fold the sides like this, and then we can attach the little fence to the roof this way. Next, we'll have to cut these strips, paint them black, and finally we'll glue them to the front and sides of the roof like this. To make the stairs, we're gonna start by cutting this part a few times, and then we'll glue layers in 2 groups, which we'll then paint black. Next, we're gonna cut these strips, and we'll use them to connect the 2 sides of the stairs this way. We're gonna do the same thing with this part. And finally, we'll have to cut this and glue 2 elements to the sides of the stairs this way. Now we can glue the stairs to the house, and once we've done that, we can start working on the roof. First, we're gonna cut all these parts, and then we'll glue them together, going from the biggest to the smallest, and making sure that they are aligned at the center. The final panel should measure 2 millimeters in thickness. We're gonna repeat the same process for these parts. Then we'll have to cut this part 3 or 4 times, and once again we'll stack all the layers together to get to a final piece that's around 2 millimeters thick. We'll have to do the same thing for this part, which is basically the same shape but flipped. We should end up with these 4 panels, which we'll have to cover with these strips cut into lightweight cardstock. And I'm not sure you can quite tell from the video, but all the strips should be slightly overlapping, like this. I feel like this makes the roof appear a little more realistic. I don't know, I just think it looks better this way. And when it comes to this piece, we'll need to add a final strip that extends just a bit beyond the panel. This way, when we assemble the 2 halves of the roof, the edge of the second panel will be concealed. At this point, we can paint all the parts of the roof black. And when the paint is dry, we can attach them to the rest of the dollhouse this way. And I mean, what's a haunted dollhouse without some scary decor, am I right? First, we can glue some teeny tiny bats to the roof, and I suggest using hot glue so they'll be slightly raised from the surface. Next, we can make some cute pumpkins using a few small beads and toothpicks. I used a couple of wooden beads that I painted in various shades of orange and purple. And also a few slightly smaller plastic beads that just happened to be orange, but I still painted them to make them look a little less plastic-y. We'll have to glue the little pumpkins to the roof this way. Then we can grab another toothpick, dip it into white paint first, and then in orange paint to make a teeny tiny candle. We'll have to make 4 candles in total, which we can then glue to the stairs handrails and to the balcony. Next, we can take a piece of paper towel, fold it over itself like this, and then we can cover it with something flaky like the fake snow I'm using here, or sawdust, or even pencil shavings, that could work. We're gonna paint the resulting piece in a few different shades of green, and I added some orange dots here and there just for fun. We'll have to make a second quote-unquote hedge, roughly the same size and shape as the first, and then we can glue both pieces to the front of the dollhouse. And our teeny tiny haunted dollhouse is ready. I hope it's not gonna be too scary for your dolls. As promised, here's the link to the free printable template, and if you want to make even more miniature dollhouses, you should totally check out this playlist next. And this is all for today's video. Until next time, bye!